ready for a virtual meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping on Monday. One of the controversial topics on the agenda will be the rapidly escalating tensions between Taiwan and China. Beijing claims that the island is part of its territory, but Taipei has its own democratic government. On Friday, Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke with a top Chinese official. The State Department says Blinken raised concerns about recent Chinese military pressure against Taiwan. China's foreign ministry said its representative told the U.S. not to support pro-independence forces on the island. Let's bring in Joshua Eisenman to talk more about this. He's an associate professor of politics at the University of Notre Dame, and much of his research is focused on China. Thank you for being here, Joshua. So what strategies has the Biden administration relied upon to approach the issue of Taiwan?
It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. I think that what we can basically say is that the Biden administration has found as much room under the existing frameworks of the three communiques in the Taiwan Relations Act as they can possibly find, right? Expanding the relationship with Taiwan in numerous different ways, but all trying to be within, as Sullivan has said, with the existing frameworks. Now, the president himself has gone a bit further than that in his comments to a town hall recently where he said that the U.S. would defend Taiwan. And that's kind of a step beyond. And there was an effort to kind of walk that back, but it's the second time he said it. So I think that the U.S. strategy on Taiwan is more declarative than it's ever been, but it's still essentially bounded by these communiques we have with China, and then the law of the land, which is the Taiwan Relations Act, which means we must sell them defensive armaments to protect themselves.
So I want to put this into context for our viewers, because there has always been problems between China and Taiwan with the United States involved. But the Chinese military has conducted hundreds of military flights near Taiwan in recent months. That's more than the Pentagon has ever recorded. Tell us, Joshua, what's behind these recent moves from Beijing?
Well, it's a fantastic question. And I think that one thing we don't tend to look at very much is what's going on in Beijing. And, Xi Jinping didn't attend the COP26. People criticized him for that, including the president. But I think it had a lot to do with what's going on domestically in China. Right now, Xi Jinping wants to remain the leader of China. That means he needs a third term. That means there can be no room between him and the Rubicon in terms of his hawkishness on Taiwan issues. And he can't leave any room for anybody to kind of flank him on this. So as I see it, Xi Jinping has the control of China pretty well within his hands right now, and he doesn't want to risk that. So my view is that he's willing to go up to the water's edge of conflict, but he will not cross the water. He will not touch the water, because if he does so, the outcomes are uncertain. And right now, he seems to have things well in hand. He just wants to make sure that there's nobody on the more hawkish militant side who can say, he's weak on this or weak on that. So I see it as very unlikely that they are actually going to come across and attack Taiwan at this time. It would seem a risk that the administration of Xi Jinping probably wouldn't want to take.
And the Biden administration has been indicating that they ought not take. Are you surprised at how direct the White House has been about Taiwan?
I am somewhat surprised, but also encouraged that they are being more direct. I think they can afford to be. The Communist Party of China is a political organization, and it seeks political opportunities and political ends. And so, the fact that they're doing what they're doing right now seems to me largely political. And so if you can find a way to engage with China to tamp down these tensions, which I think they're going to discuss in this upcoming call, hopefully find a way to tamp down tensions. Of course, Xi Jinping will probably say, stop supporting Taiwan to the degree you are. And Biden will say, well, please stop, flying sorties and interrogating or pushing the island around and bullying them. And hopefully they can come to a modus vivendi for at least a continuation of peace and a kind of understanding in the Taiwan Straits so things don't escalate any further. I don't think that's in the interests of the US or China right now. So I'm somewhat optimistic that they'll be able to at least come up with some modus vivendi for continued peace in the Straits. But as I said before, Xi Jinping has a real reason to show his domestic audience that he's tough on Taiwan.
So Taiwan, though, is just one part of a complex relationship between the United States and China, and it's helpful understanding what's going on in domestic politics in China with Xi Jinping and the Communist Party to understand better about what he is bringing into this conversation. But just at a high level, what do both Xi Jinping and President Biden hope to get out of these discussions?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't presume to necessarily know what these two leaders are hoping to get out. But as I said before, I think their number one thing is to, I would say, establish a modus vivendi in the Taiwan Strait, at least temporarily, so that they don't come into conflict with each other. Because Xi Jinping, as I said, is wanting to rattle the sabers and bang the drums because that is what he needs to do domestically. But as I said, I don't think he would bring it to a head because there's only risk in that at this point. And another important issue we could talk about here is the climate deal, where the U.S. and China are kind of going back and forth on this. But again, I see that the problems China is having with fuel shortages in the Northeast are almost more of a political concern than climate change, which can be blamed on the West or blamed on the U.S. So, I'm not optimistic that they're going to find a real solution between the U.S. and China on climate change discussions they'll have. Anything they sign will almost certainly not be enough. But I am hopeful on the Taiwan discussion if they have it. But we are also bounded to some degree. It's important for listeners to understand the 6 assurances the U.S. has given to Taiwan mean the U.S. will not negotiate for Taiwan or negotiate on behalf of Taiwan. There's a kind of limit to what the U.S. will do and talk about on Taiwan because of the assurances we've given to Taipei.
All right, Joshua Eisenman, thank you.
Thank you.